Welcome to the Endure Hunt Podcast. Join me as I share my experiences as an emergent hunter, offer advice on how to overcome challenges, and pursue your passion for hunting. This is episode 21, and we're talking all about my recent mule deer hunt in Montana. If this is your first time listening to the show, thank you very much for taking the time out of your day to listen to me. If you're not familiar, I'm Andrew Lukosevic, the host of this show. I started hunting in 2018, actually in Montana on a mule deer hunt, and I returned there this year. In that time, I've hunted 6 different states, a bunch of different species, and I have gone all in as far as I can into hunting. One of the things that I think is really important is taking time to reflect following a hunt to see what went right, what went wrong. And I'm not going to dive into all the details at this point for the hunt in Montana. I'm planning on having Peter come in. We're going to talk about everything that went into it, all the troubles that we found, the deer that we've seen, sort of a day by day, and just talk about everything that happened in the hunt. Peter's got to go back to work, and Thanksgiving is next week as I'm recording this. This is going to come out the week after Thanksgiving. Anyway, I've got a coordinate schedule with him so that we can get time together and actually sit down and do a good podcast the way we have done the last couple of times. This podcast episode, I wanted to just talk about what are the 5 lessons that I really took away from this hunt. The things that I learned, kind of the big overarching themes that when I go on my next mule deer hunt, or any hunt really, I think these are general enough that they can apply across the board. But definitely if I go back to Montana, mule deer, particularly the tactic from number 5 is going to be important to understand, at least for the unit that I was hunting in. I'm not going to share any units or anything like that. It is a general hunt. But anyway, all right, these are the 5 lessons that I learned mule deer hunting in Montana this year, my 5 takeaways. Lesson number 1 is know your critical assumptions. One thing that if you've listened to any of my recent podcasts, when I talk about hunt planning, preparing, making sure that you're ready to go, you need to have plans A through F. You can't just have plans A, B, and C. And I did that. I had plans A through F. If you ask my wife, I had all sorts of notes and waypoints and things marked. Basically spent many nights doing all of that work. But I made a rookie mistake for someone who's from military intelligence. If you didn't know, I'm a Marine Corps veteran. I served in the military intelligence side of things. And one of the things that you have to do when you're doing mission planning is what are the key assumptions that you're making? The things that will throw off the rest of the plan. And it's a rookie mistake. I should have done this assessment, but there were, in all of the places that we were planning on hunting, all of the glassing spots, all of the potential camping areas, the deer areas that we thought looked bucky, they all relied on 2 roads. We had only 2 ways of getting into and out of this area. And it turned out that both of those roads were extremely muddy. So this part of Montana had a bunch of snow and rain. It built up. And this is actually going to lead into my second lesson learned from this, but I'll get there. Know what your key assumptions are, because you could have the best plan in the world. And, I've said this on podcasts in the past. No plan survives first contact. So your plan is going to have some flexibility in it. You're going to need to be able to change. I thought that my plan was flexible enough, and it was not. I should have looked at my routes and realized that I was giving myself too much reliance on these specific roads, and I should have looked for alternative options. Fortunately, we were able to find other places to hunt because we actually could not hunt these areas, and we were able to find some really good spots. But I would have preferred to have found those spots before getting out to Montana. This way I wouldn't have to sort of panic when I was out there and question whether or not I was even going to be able to hunt. So, know your critical assumptions. In every planning process, you are making critical assumptions about something. Try to figure out what they are and make sure you have contingencies for them. All right, lesson number 2, bring enough recovery gear. I am serious about this one. I've seen so many YouTube videos and watched all of these tips about making sure you have enough stuff. And I, for the first time in my 6 hunting seasons, 2018, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23. This is my 6th hunting season, 5th hunting year. In that time, I had never gotten stuck. My truck never got stuck until this year. was going down that first road that was leading to the primary hunting area that we were looking at. And I made it about 1.5 miles in when I hit a really rough mud patch that I thought was okay, but ended up basically being a big puddle that was just mud and water. And I couldn't see it because there was tall grass and there was basically a little pond that I drove into. Traction control turned on because I forgot to turn it off, which that's a sub tip. Turn off traction control if you're driving in particularly muddy areas. 4 high, traction control off, don't slow down. It's basically the advice that I can give you. Unfortunately for me, I hit this pile of mud. Even though I was going fast, my traction control turned on, wheels stopped, and I sank. I got stuck in the mud. To make things more fun, Peter and his dad were still half a day's drive away. I was alone. Fortunately, I was on a piece of public land that has a field office that I had just driven by about 1.5 miles ago. And I jogged my happy ass over there. And fortunately, someone was still there. I got there early enough in the day that there were people there, and they were able to use a tractor and pull me out. I'm very happy that the week before this hunt, I have had a tow rope in my Amazon list for literally like 3 years. I've never bought it. This year, I bought it. I bought a kinetic rope and 2 shackles. I'm so happy that I did because I needed those. That is what got my truck out of the mud. Otherwise, I would have been sleeping in a mud puddle on a road. It would not have been fun. I ended up not going back there. I tried the other road that I talked about in lesson number 1. And that road was significantly better. I think I made it 10 miles down that road, but you needed to go way deeper in order to get to the good stuff. And I started getting into some sketchy roads and some mud, and I didn't want to take that chance without having another vehicle because otherwise I would have had to call a tow company, and they are nowhere near there. All of this to say, I'm going to be looking into getting some traction boards. I definitely want better tires. My truck is only 2 years old, and it has the factory tires on it still, which are not good enough. There's no way you could have used a winch in this, even though I got stuck. There was no tree or anything I could anchor to, so that really wouldn't have helped me. But I'm definitely going to be thinking about, all right, if I'm going to do another one of these, what kind of gear do I need? Alternatively, you just wait until your hunting partner is there. Fortunately, I was able to get out of there and got pulled out and then moved to the next place. All right, lesson number 3. You are not as moral of a person as you think you are before the moment of opportunity strikes. That was a mouthful. I'm sure there's a more eloquent way of putting it. But going into the hunt, after all of the shooting and practice preparation I had done, I told myself that 500 yards was my cap. That was the limit that I wanted. I even set it on my turret only out to 500 yards because I wanted to stop myself from shooting further. I did not have an opportunity to shoot further than that this year with the current setup. So I've used this specific load before out to 1,000 yards with this gun, but I added the suppressor and that did adjust things a tiny bit. Now, I say all of this because I had 2 opportunities at deer. And in the second opportunity, I took a shot I shouldn't have. And I know I shouldn't have. Fortunately, I did not wound it. It was a clean miss. But this deer showed up at 440 yards, and I could not get a shot at him. The angle was just off by like inches. We were so close. So he goes down this ridge. When he's out of sight, I book it after him. I'm like, the wind is going strong enough. He can't hear me. I will catch up and close the distance. He's going to be at 200 yards by the time I get there. Yeah, that wasn't the case. He went out there, and I ranged him at under 800 yards, but like 770 or something. And he's walking back, super calm, no problem. So I range him, and the adrenaline or something kicked in, and I dialed anyway, even though like I had my dope on my phone. I dial anyway. I get settled in, perfect prone position. He turns broadside and stops, and I take the shot. Fortunately, it was a clean miss, but the rest of the hunt, I just kept telling myself, you never should have done that. You said you weren't going to do it. You know that was a stupid decision. You're so lucky that you didn't wound it. But in that moment, I had this whole thing built up where this was on the last day. I had this whole thing built up in my head, like I've been doing this for 6 years or 6 hunting seasons. I've had a lot of different success. I want to take a mule deer so bad. I wanted it so bad, and the adrenaline was going, and I just wasn't thinking. And I'm not making excuses for myself. I need to be better than that. I'm just telling you how it was. This lesson is probably the most personal and the one I'm going to take the hardest because I like to think I'm better than that. It was a mistake. I'm not proud of it. I'm happy that I didn't wound it. It was just a clean miss, but I'm still not happy about it. Yeah. All right, let's move on to lesson number 4. Optics can be deceiving. This one has 2 sort of sub-lessons learned. One, man, everything looks closer than it is in real life when you're looking through optics. I mean, I think we were glassing deer consistently at 2 miles-ish, or it would probably average around 2 miles. I don't think I glassed deer with a few exceptions, because there were a couple spots that we got in where deer got really close. But for the most part, our plan was find a spot to glass and then figure out how to close the distance. So barring the few exceptions, I think the shortest distance was probably about 500 yards that we glassed them from. And then I think furthest was about 3 miles. The problem was, like, when you're sitting on this glassing knob and you're looking and you're like, that's 500 yards away. I can get over there. When in reality, most of the time they were a mile away. Like, to the point where I was questioning my rangefinder. I would try and range and it would just nothing. And then you pull out Go Hunt Maps and using the rangefinder tool or the measure distance tool, and you're like, oh, this looks really close because I'm looking through 12x50s or I'm looking through my spotter, but it's actually over a mile away, and that's why my rangefinder's not working, because it literally can't go that far. So I think the takeaway from that would be, if you find your glassing spot, maybe use a measure distance tool and just kind of get a lay of the land to see how far you're looking. Or before you get excited and start stalking in on something, take some extra time and make sure that you are looking at the true distance that you need to go. Because for us, everything looked closer than it actually was. I mean, everything did. I don't think we did a single stalk that was less than a mile. The second part to this is, when you're that far away and you're using optics, you might not be able to see all of the bucks. You might need to get closer. I saw a buck on the second day, and then I don't think we saw a single buck again until the final day of the hunt. But we saw a crap ton of deer every day. I mean, I don't think I saw less than 30 or 40 deer a sit. Maybe the lowest day was like 20. But every single time, I'm like, there's not a single buck in this group? Even throwing the spotter on, I couldn't see a single buck? Really? But then on the last day, when Peter's dad went after his buck, we watched his buck go from like 200 yards out to about 500 yards or so. And he was with 2 does. I watched him go from there to 500 plus yards away. I know he's a buck. In my binos and in the spotter, I could not tell that he was a buck. He looked like a doe. The antlers disappeared. Now, this day was particularly warm and we were getting a bit of a mirage effect and the distances were getting out there. But I suspect that there were bucks in those groups of does every day. And we were either too far enough away that we just couldn't tell with the optics, or our optics aren't good enough to tell. Thinking about that makes me wish we may have been a little bit more aggressive with some of those groups of does. We did not put on as many stalks as we could have because our tags for these units were antlered only mule deer. I suspect that if we did make moves and try to get closer to some of those groups to take a shot, we probably would have found a buck in most of those groups. Obviously, hindsight is 20/20. Couldn't have done that. But after seeing all of the deer that we did, on the last day of the hunt and how many bucks there were, I'm very confident that there were bucks in those groups, but we were being deceived by our optics. All right, lesson number 5. Successful hunters do what is required, not what they want to do. Going into this hunt, and if you listen to episode 20, where I kind of talk about my plans and thoughts leading into this hunt, one of the things I talk about is how there are many roads, and there are some dips and divots in those roads where I think if you get even a half a mile away from the hunters, you will find plenty of deer. That's halfway true. We saw a lot of elk, deer, some weird melanistic badger thing, which was really cool. But we saw the most bucks when we did what everybody else was doing. So we hunted for 6 days, I think, 6 days. And we did not utilize vehicles for hunting until the last day. We were the only people we saw that hiked into areas away from the roads. Our best spot where we saw the most deer, our best 2 spots actually, were both a little bit over a mile hike, which isn't that far. And we saw plenty of deer, but you really couldn't make a move on them. The terrain wasn't that great. So on our last day of the hunt, after we had exhausted every spot that we tried, we were like, you know what? Let's Hail Mary it. Everyone else is driving the roads. Let's drive the roads. Throughout that 6 days, we saw 6 bucks. 5 of those were on the final day when we were driving the roads. And some of them were mature. Granted, the best buck that we saw, huge deer, was on this secluded piece of private that was surrounded by block management and BLM land. But we saw confirmed 5 bucks doing the road driving method. We didn't want to do it. We were joking about everybody who did that and relied on it. But at the end of the day, 3 out of the 4 stalks that we went on were on that day and were because we spotted deer from the road. I don't know that would work in every unit, every location, but for the area we were at, the way the land was laid out and the options that we had, it was definitely the most effective method. I think that knowing what I know now, if we had another day or 2, I definitely think we would have been able to take one. But got to go back home, go to work, and that is the way it goes. Lessons learned and more in the knowledge bank and experience bank for when we go out again on another hunt. I do have one bonus tip that is mostly directed just at myself. It's a bit of self-criticism. You're not as good as you think you are. Going into this hunt, I was extremely optimistic and genuinely thought that we would get at least 1 mule deer down. I thought we were going to do it. And I've had a lot of time to think about how grateful I am for the opportunity. I cherish the time out there. I get pretty wrapped up emotionally into it because Peter can share this experience with his dad, and I can't do that with mine. And I just value the moments being out there, knowing that there are people that don't get to do that. And I'm appreciative for all the hunting experience that I have. But when I look at all of those hunting experiences, only one animal, only one, that I took myself, all of the work put in by myself on public land. That's the very first deer that I shot in 2019. The very first one. Everything since then has either been on private land that I have been fortunate enough to have access to, and I'm not diminishing that. I'm very grateful for it. Or on public land guided, which is how I got my elk. This pronghorn, if you're watching this on YouTube or Spotify video, that pronghorn was shot on private land in Wyoming. This is my second bow kill ever. I shot him on Carrie Beeson's place right before going to Montana, actually, like 3 days before. The other whitetails that I've shot here in Texas have all been on private land, low fence, 1 high fence axis. And, I just reflect on the fact that I have a lot more work to do. I have a lot more to learn, a lot more experiences to have, and I'm very much looking forward to taking that next public land, truly DIY animal, whether that's whitetails, mule deer, elk. I don't really care what it is. I don't care how big it is either. That sense of fulfillment is kind of what I'm looking for, knowing that you can do it. Yeah. There's just something about that. I want to say that I've done that again and sort of prove to myself that I can do it, that I don't have to be on private land. I am beyond grateful for the opportunity to go out to Montana. I wish I had an elk tag in that unit because there were some phenomenal bulls that I don't think anyone had a clue were there. But that's how it goes. I had a deer tag. We didn't see any whitetails, just mule deer. I did have a fantastic time. It was a great hunt. Very difficult in different ways, which we'll get into probably. I don't know if it'll be the next episode. We will find out when I can coordinate with Peter, get that one on the books and get that one out. But we will talk in depth about everything going into this hunt, talk about the day by day. Very excited to sit down with Peter and get that done. To sum up my 5 lessons learned, I'll hold the bonus one because that's mostly for myself. Number 1, know your critical assumptions. Whenever you're making any plan, there is something that you are assuming will happen in order for that plan to be successful. Number 2, bring enough recovery gear so that you can get yourself out of a difficult situation. Number 3, you're not as moral as you think you are. In the heat of the moment, with adrenaline pumping, wanting to fill your tag desperately, you might push yourself to do something that you wouldn't do if you weren't under pressure. Number 4, optics can be deceiving. Things probably are further away than you think they are, and there may be a buck in there. You might just not know it yet. And then number 5, successful hunters do what's required, not what they want to do. I think if we drove the road sooner, probably would have had success. But we went into it with these preconceived notions. And anyway, I'm not going to beat that dead horse. I hope you learned something from this. I hope that you can take my mistakes and the lessons that I've learned, apply it to your hunts so that you don't have to make the same mistakes that I have. All right, that is it for this episode. Thank you for taking the time out of your day to listen to me. Time is our most valuable asset, and I do not take it lightly that you are choosing to spend it with me. I hope you got something out of this podcast. Please share it if you did so that someone else could benefit from it. Reach out to me. Let me know what you thought. I love getting DMs and messages from people, so please send me a message. I'm on Instagram at Endurhunt, ENDURHUNT. And I'll talk to you guys next time.